Picture, because I went to Istanbul in 1979. Hands up those in this room were old enough to be alive in 1979, when Turkey was on its knees. It had inflation of up to 100% per day at times. The currency was devaluing at a rate of knots that was extraordinary. Istanbul was enjoying a small population of 1.6 million people only. This is I'm telling this for our Turkish friends because they can't remember it back that far. It is now, of course, over 16 million, so it's been a huge change in activities. My job was to try and support the Turkish shipping industry because I was an insurance broker. And I realised there was this massive crisis where the country was on its knees. It was totally self-sufficient in everything apart from oil and coffee. Surprising that it's not sufficient in coffee, but not unsurprising it wasn't self-sufficient in oil. I remember the Saudis offering the Turkish government 25 years of free oil supply in return for all your Mohammed artefacts which were in Topkapi, which quite rightly and bravely the Turkish government turned down. And what were we to do as a British company to help our Turkish friends who were on their knees, and shipping being so important to the prosperity of the nation? And so we devised a couple of plans which enabled Turkey to insure their ships, which at that point no one would insure them, enabled Turkey to prosper and keep trade going. And so I feel not only very proud to have been part of that, because I was leading the team in terms of the UK at the ripe old age of 23 actually, and I feel very proud to have been part of it, to have found a solution, and of course what it did do was enable me to get to know our Turkish friends extremely well and to understand the type of people we were dealing with. And I think there are three things that I learned. One was that Turkish people are brave and courageous. They're also extremely tough and tough to do business with, but when you've done a deal with them, they're very fair. And that was the thing that, and loyal to those once they've done the deal. So those of you from the UK who haven't done business in Turkey, I can tell you we're in for a very pleasant surprise. But you will come out with tears running down your eyes as they ground you into the dust with the deal that they're trying to do. But once it was done, it was fair and loyal and engaged for a long period of time. So I owe Turkey a huge amount. I learnt at the knees of the Turkish motherland or fatherland, whichever you prefer to call it, how to do business, the integrity of business, and I learnt the skill of doing business, and it set me in a very good stead when I started my own company about a year later, 2 years later in 1982. So I owe Turkey a great deal, and it is therefore no surprise that when my wife said to me, "Where are you going, where should we go for your 50th birthday?" that I said, Istanbul. Despite the fact, by the way, in 1979, I was machine gunned across the street from the Hilton Hotel. Hasn't it may come as a surprise, that doesn't happen too often to me in my travels as the trade envoy. I normally get a police escort everywhere I go. That's largely protect the countries from me travelling there. But that is the only time I've been shot at, and there was at that time tremendous not only economic difficulty but civil difficulty. And isn't it marvellous now to witness Turkey as a powerhouse of where genuinely East meets West, where it has established itself at that focal point of the two worlds meeting, and that it is returned to the powerhouse it once was as this enormously impressive trading nation. And it's to Turkey that we in Britain turn for help this time, as we suffer and come out of our own economic difficulties, the most catastrophic, arguably, we as a country have ever had. That we look to our friends from Turkey to work with us, to trade with us, to support our trade initiatives, and to support the British people in trading to the East, through Turkey and in Turkey. And why is it a no-brainer for Turkish businesses that they do business with British companies? Well, because we share one of the things I was talking about. You may not think we're courageous and strong, but we are fair. And underpinning our fairness is the rule of law, which is so fundamental to British business. And, of course, transparency, because of a number of actions we've taken as a government and previous governments have taken about operating transparently in the UK. This is fundamental now in a world where governments are overthrown by social media when they believe their governments are corrupt. And so to be a transparent businessman who is fair, basing its trade on the rule of law, is a no-brainer for any other country to do business with a British business. And so I really don't need to say a great deal other than that, because we both share common ethoses, other than to say that the purpose of these events is what government is all about, and that is facilitating. Governments cannot do the trade. Governments cannot trade ourselves out of the economic problems we're in. Governments cannot recover the problems that Turkey had. Ultimately, it is you in this room as businesses who are going to trade yourselves and ourselves out of the problems that we faced. Government can set the framework. We can put laws in place that make it easier, as we have done in the United Kingdom. It is the quickest place in Europe to set up a business. You can arguably set up a business in this country in 48 hours. We in the United Kingdom will have the lowest corporation tax in the G20 and for many more countries at 21%. We have got rid of rules and regulations to facilitate, even though some businesses might not think we've got rid of the rules and regulations, we've got rid of a lot of rules and regulations that have been a drag on business prosperity. So those things that government can do, it is ultimately you in this room who can pick up the baton and make occasions like these into prosperity occasions and help Britain on the way, which is what we are, to our economic recovery and continue the wonderful progress that we've seen in Turkey, and which, as someone who went there in 1979, I sit and watch with great admiration.
Well, Lord Marland, thank you very much indeed for those illuminating personal insights, very interesting. And I'd like to move on to our next speaker and welcome Sheriff Egeling, Vice Chairman of the Turkish-British Business Council. Sheriff.
Right Honourable Lord Marland, Mr. Hasan Pehlivan, ladies and gentlemen. As the Vice Chairman of the Turkish-British Business Council and on behalf of the Foreign Economic Relations Board, TEİK, I would like to express my deepest pleasure to address this distinguished audience of Turkish and British SMEs today. The Turkish-British Business Council, working under the umbrella of TEİK, focuses on the development of bilateral economic relations between Turkey and UK, which already have gained a very positive momentum in the last couple of years. Prime Minister Erdogan, together with Prime Minister Cameron, declared a golden era in the relations between our two countries during his recent visit to London. TBBC's, that's our council, primary goal is to enhance Turkey's and Britain's economic relationship to reach its true capacity. Even though the trade volume between Turkey and Britain adds up to $14 billion annually, there is still much potential for growth. In this respect, the Business Council priorities are to develop balanced economic and trade relations between the two countries, specify the potential areas of cooperation, create the necessary environment for enhanced business relations, identify problems in bilateral joint business and offer solutions, promote the cooperation of Turkish and British companies in third markets, organize economic, cultural, political and social events and activities to complement mutual economic relations. The Council also works to strengthen cooperation between small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs, and attract more direct investment from UK to Turkey and vice versa, from Turkey to UK. TBBC is focused on infrastructure, contracting, construction, ICT, defense industry, aviation, automotive and healthcare sectors as fertile areas for bilateral expansion. I hope that you will find the discussions useful and leave this program with new business ideas for a stronger Turkish-British cooperation, particularly at the level of the SMEs, which are a significant pillar of economic development. The winners of the future will almost certainly be firms who are already only now beginning to attract attention. The honor roll of the large UK companies are already present in Turkey, but we need more cooperation between the SMEs. The importance of small and medium-sized enterprises in the economic transformation is obvious. SMEs are the backbone of the economy. They account for close to 60% of foreign trade, value added, and most importantly, 80% of total employment. Today, we'll concentrate on three sectors: the ICT, construction and architecture, and automotive industry. Having this opportunity, I also would like to introduce you Foreign Economic Relations Board of Turkey briefly. DEİK is one of the leading business organizations in Turkey, a voluntary business organization, which aims to promote economic relations between Turkey and its trading partners. Since our establishment in 1988, considerable progress has been made in increasing the level of bilateral trade, raising the level of involvement of Turkish companies abroad, and multiplying the number of foreign investments in Turkey. DEİK works through its bilateral business councils. As of October 2013, 114 business councils operate under the umbrella of DEİK. Turkish-British Business Council has been a part of DEİK since its very beginning, for more than 20 years. And I am proud to act as a deputy chairman of this distinguished organization since over 15 years and have been instrumental in launching various successful programs with UKTI, which have brought the relations between Turkey and UK at its peak and only hope for the better in the future. We also cherish working with ISPAT all over the world. I thank them for supporting us here today also. I would like to thank you and for your kind attention, and particularly UKTI and ISPAT for their efforts to bring this dynamic group of business people together. I wish you a very successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sheriff Bey. Now for our next presentation, I'd like to invite Hasan Pehlivan, Principal Advisor to the President of the Investment Support and Promotion Agency of Turkey, ISPAT.
Lord Marlin, Mr. Sheriff Egeli, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a good morning and wish you a very successful conference today. First of all, let me thank also DEİK for the Economic Relations Board as well as UKTI bringing us together so that we can start to discuss what we can do to improve our cooperation. but particularly SMEs we would like to discuss. Yesterday, it was the first day of the event, and we discussed many fundamental things, especially what happened in the macroeconomy of the world, what is happening with Fed decisions, etc. But one thing common, everybody has agreed that whatever happens, what the Fed decides, and so Turkey's growth fundamentals are well in place. So in the last decade, the country has grown, the GDP has grown roughly 5% in average. And the OECD estimates, in fact we had also yesterday Goldman Sachs economist, he also affirmed that Turkey will continue to grow its potential, and in the next 5 years the average 5% growth is still expected. But this growth is not coming just itself. There are some fundamental parameters. We have a very young population. They have ambitions to do new business, entrepreneurship spirit. Definitely financial and political stability. We didn't have this, if we didn't have this crisis in 2001, maybe we are not talking about the strength of Turkey today, because we cleaned up our banking system. We have a very good regulated sector. And today we have banks very strong, with their capital requirement ratio has increased more than 15%, even better than the Basel III standards. Strong macroeconomic fundamentals. Everybody is talking about sovereign debt issue worldwide. Most of the countries now, they took over from the banks all the bad loans on themselves, so they have a lot of bad debt. EU average is 8%, and Turkey GDP, debt GDP ratio is roughly 35%, and next year we expect to decrease to 30%. But all of these are good things to say. We know the fundamentals are ready, but what makes the growth is really the SMEs itself, because they have the entrepreneurs try to create new business opportunities. They are more excited, and I think we do not want them to be too professional like the big giants, because they are able to go after the big opportunities. To give some numbers, 99% of the Turkish economy today is existing from the SMEs. And roughly they 65% of the turnovers are generated from the SMEs. Employment was 78%. And one number which I have received today, it was interesting for me, the 65% of the Turkish exports are done by the SMEs. So this is quite an important fact. Turkey, in terms of the investment environment, we are doing a lot to help the companies to come to Turkey. When Honorable Lord Mayor, when he mentioned about the rule of law, I think Turkey is doing a lot in that front. We are continuously updating our legislation, and most of the SMEs and the international investors and our own even SMEs, we are updating the legislation so frequently. Sometimes they are saying we need to digest, but we need to make reforms. We need to catch up with the international standards, and sometimes we need to go beyond them. So our government, over the last 10 years, we are continuing the reforms, and we will continue to do so. As an international investor, you will be treated as a local investor, no differences. And moreover, what you have is you can go to the free international arbitration, and that is even offered. So you are legally protected when you do business in Turkey. And as a result, in the last decade, we have attracted more than $130 billion of foreign direct investment. And if we go before 2002, Turkey has taken only $15 billion of foreign direct investment in the preceding 3 decades from 2002. And we have roughly 30,000 international companies operating in Turkey, and the British companies roughly represent 2,500 of them. So British companies are one of the significant investors in Turkey. But when we look at also the FDI that Turkey is giving out, in the past there is no significant number that we can talk about. And this is not the mandate of our agency. Our agency is mainly in charge of bringing investors in Turkey and helping them to invest. But these numbers cannot go unnoticed. I would like to share with you. First time in 2010, Turkey invested outside more than $1 billion. It is first time in its history. 2011, we go up to $2 billion. 2012, it went up to $4 billion. And in 2013, first 3 quarters are showing roughly $2.5 billion of outward investment. So it seems like Turkey now has the potential not only to invite, but also our SMEs are going abroad and looking for opportunities. In fact, the opportunities are for 2 reasons. Not only market expansion, we see some brand, also some technology know-how transfer as well. We see our SMEs and businessmen doing acquisitions out of Turkey. But also it is good to see when I come to London, having a cup of Turkish coffee in the Piccadilly Street, like kahve dünyası. That was a good surprise for me. You do not see that anywhere else of the world, and it is good to see these brands more and more out of Turkey. So, for the British investors, in general to all investors, we will today discuss maybe 3 sectors, but I would like to give the broader picture. The country is today has been locked in this Vision 2023 goals. It is our centennial of the Republic. So we have ambition to triple our economy, and we would like to aim to be within the top 10 economy. We are today 17th largest economy, but with the pace of growth, it is a target can be achievable. But to achieve this target, we have some focus sectors. I mean, one of the main drivers we will focus is technology-heavy sectors. You will see that ICT is one of them you will discuss, but also other technology-heavy sectors will be promoted by the different incentive schemes as well. Infrastructure is important, as well as the automotive sector is already #1 export market of Turkey, but we would like to increase the value of it. You know, if you go to the more details, you will hear this afternoon, especially in the transmission systems, etc., etc. And we have this national branded car ambition, which we still insist on doing it. And energy, it is key because you are growing, especially renewables. We need to decrease our current account deficit. We want to make Russia more richer than today. So we need to use our local resources. So these are all these goals of Turkey and sectors are all highlighted in Vision 2023, and I would suggest to go through them. Before concluding my remarks, I would like to emphasize what we do as investment promotion agency. My colleague after me will more talk about it, but I would like to say that we are in each step of the investment, we would like to be with you. Either clarify, identify opportunities with you, or if you have any issues, which I hope you don't, but we are ready to help you, hand in hand. And I would like to say that you will never walk alone in every step of your investment. So I would like to thank you and have a very good, successful conference today. Thank you.
Very much indeed, Hassan, for that interesting overview. We have time for some Q&A, questions and answers, before our first coffee break. So if I could invite Lord Marland and Sheriff Bey back up on the stage to take some seats, and that would be... Oh, thank you very much. And just a bit of admin on the mics. We have a couple of roving mics, I believe. They're one on each side of the room. And the usual format, please, if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Then when you're invited to speak, please say who you are and which company you're from. So, could I invite anybody for an initial question from the audience, please? Yes, gentleman in the front here. Chris.
Yes, good morning. Chris Cole, Chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce in Turkey. One point that I hope we'll get to grips with through the day, but just to the panel. I mean, it's very important for British business to understand that Turkey is more than just Istanbul, and that the dynamic cities of Anatolia are also driving the economy. And what we have to do is make sure that British business understand what these cities offer. And part of our remit in the British Chamber of Commerce in Turkey is to expand and raise the profile of these cities. So I just asked a question of the panel: how do you see that developing in the future?
Who would like to respond? Sheriff or Hassan? Which of you would like?
Thank you very much bringing that one, because any investor comes to Turkey, I mean, eventually they, let's say a real estate developer, one of the very most common investors we start to see over the last 5 years. They always ask about Istanbul. But I totally agree, in Istanbul you can grow to a certain degree. It offers especially some benefits. But today in Turkey, every region has its own specific dynamism. Such as if you are going to make business with Middle East especially, we recommend companies to go to the south or east of Turkey. And we are providing even more incentives if you go out of Istanbul. We help you with some tax breaks, even some land allocation on specific investments. And so the government is pushing with different mechanisms to go. But Istanbul is a beauty, it's a totally different brand. It will be hard to move that, but slowly we see that large manufacturing sites and they are going out of Istanbul. I mean, to give an example, for textile, there was an Indian company who invested a year ago for a $500 million investment. They go to Adana because most of the textile industry is growing there. It's part of the supply chain. He will be there. And we start to see that automotive industry accumulated around Kocaeli, Bursa. Now they are going to close to Manisa, Izmir. So they are trying to extend. So I think that is where we as investment promotion agency help, because the investor may not know where to go. If we understand their business, we can try to help them where they can find the good skills, labor, where they can get the most benefits. Even we help them to find a location where they can start even the operation. But I totally agree, there are more opportunities than outside of Istanbul.
Yes, I would add that we share similar problems here in the UK. Everyone tends to flock to London because it has the bandwidth of skills, and it is a magnet for so much on the social side, apart from anything else, as indeed Istanbul is. So Istanbul it's very difficult to prevent the tide of people coming to it, other than the fact that British tourists, of course, flock to Izmir, Bodrum, Fethiye, etc., and so have a far greater knowledge of the country than most business people. I think Turkey, the opportunities will open up and are opening up, as Excellency has just mentioned, and will open up further. For example, the pipeline that's just about to open, going in from Kurdistan, will create a lot of opportunities there. By the way, the pipeline is going to be supplied, the oil through that's going to be supplied by a British company, Genel Petroleum, which is British-Turkish, but registered on the stock exchange here, and another British company, Gulf Petroleum. So I think that as the regional parts open up and start showcasing themselves, as we are trying to do in the United Kingdom with Manchester, Newcastle, Birmingham, obviously, then there will be regional opportunities. And I think underpinning that, as I said in my speech, is the fact that the way of doing business in Turkey is very attractive for British companies, as you know, because you're based there. And it's just a question of going that step further to find opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
I ran the largest Turkish foreign trade company for 30 years, so I'll be a bit more practical. If you are in IT business, ICT business, the place you would look for cooperation is Istanbul, because all the young people who are interested in ICT are in Istanbul, and there are some R&D labs and offices built by the big industry in their factories, but the main part is in Istanbul. If you want to produce or develop something to be able to export to Iraq, northern Iraq or to Iraq also, then you have to go to Gaziantep or Marash or Malatya, because having that produced in Istanbul will not make you competitive. Logistic is very expensive today, so you have to be near there, near the Iraqi border, near the Syrian border, or the Iranian border to be able to service their requirements. And you must think that Iraq is the second largest export country for Turkey after Germany, and it will surpass Germany. I hope this year we will be having about $15 billion of exports annually to Iraq. If you are in automotive industry, you have to go to Kocaeli or Bursa or Konya, because the passenger cars are built in, and they are built more and more by the Koreans, the Japanese, Ford, Italians, French, in this area, Kocaeli and Bursa, and the truck and bus industry is being built in Konya now. So these are the places. You won't have anything to do in Istanbul for them. So you have to choose according to the needs of what you are going to do. There are enough places in Turkey. Turkey is a very large country, and we have now more than 12 cities in Turkey which have a population of over 1 million people. So what we call the Anatolian tigers are growing to be real lions now very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Do we have any more questions, please, from the audience? One here.
Thank you. Bekir Sami Amantoğlu, Bilgi Sistemleri, Head of Monsieur IT Technology Chamber, and Istanbul Chamber of Commerce IT Group Chamber Leader. I'm just asked for this organization. Yesterday we had a great trip to Tech City with my colleagues, and when we look for the partnership understanding, they invite us to establish an English IT subsidiary in England, in London, and is this all for the partnership? Okay, they told us the English government will give some, let's say, supports, tax, decreasing tax, etc. Okay, but nothing for partnership. Only invite us for establishing a subsidiary in England. When I understand partnership, let's do English firm and Turkish ICT firms, for example, for ICT side, doing business together and initiating this for further and future expenses. What do you understand from the partnership, or actually, I don't know, the automotive side or construction side, but for the ICT side, I asked this for Lord Martin, what do you understand from the partnership? Okay, thank you.
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, clearly, in terms of Tech City, what we're trying to do is create what it says on the tin, a tech city, tech hub, where we attract businesses. And I'm glad you're thinking of investing there or putting people there. We obviously have some incentives to attract people to do it, and to invest there and set up businesses there. I mean, it's been an incredible magnet for business activity. I mean, I think there are nearly 40,000 businesses setting up or based in Tech City. So that's, I think it's a totally different issue from setting up in partnership. Partnership obviously is very important because it's about skills transfer in particular. It's also about sharing balance sheets and stuff like that. And I think if you were going to take product to the wider world, then the partnership aspect is very important, and I can think of no better people to be in partnership than Turkish businesses. And but it is a different issue from the one you've just enunciated about Tech City.
If you allow me to share our experience, because we receive comments as well similarly, can you introduce us some companies? This is very tough job as a government entity. At the end of the day, we are very close to the private sector, but as a government entity to show this as the partners is very difficult. But what we try to do is the other approach is once we understand what you are trying to sell, what you want to produce, or what you want to give as a service, then we can try to pull out a list of companies. We say this is the a la carte menu. Usually we work with Müsaat as well, or other NGOs in Turkey like ITO, ISO, etc., all the chambers, and they provide us list. And when we provide it to the investors, and investors see, please, I want to go from these to 4 companies, and we put you together with 4 companies. This is the way we operate in Turkey. That is how we try to develop partnerships. It's a little bit of tailor-made. It is a little bit specific work, tough work, but I'm not sure if it is the case, the reversal is happening in the UK, I'm not sure. It would be good to ask the UKTI to reply on that.
Perhaps we could say, thank you very much. Perhaps we could say a little bit more about that as the morning goes through, and my colleagues from the UK Trade and Investment teams might be able to add to that. I think we would say that one of the main reasons for having this event today was precisely because we're interested in forming partnerships. We know that it isn't necessarily all that easy, and part of the idea of today was to bring people together and to explore possibilities in 3 sectors that we think would be promising. So I hope that the meetings and discussions you will have later will lead to some fruitful discussions. But just to add to that, as part of UKTI's mission as a government organisation in the UK to work particularly with SMEs, and so by partnerships, I won't try to define partnerships, but I think that with different kinds of collaborations, which might be, for example, joining with Turkish companies to enter third markets, a very important part of our initiative in the Turkey and UK Trade and Investment teams are to introduce British companies and Turkish companies to work together to enter other country markets. And thirdly, we have a whole series of multiplier and stakeholder partners that we work with, as well as obviously DAKE, the British Chamber of Commerce in Turkey already met Chris Gore, but also the Turkish-British Business Council and the Turkish-British Chamber of Commerce and Industry based here in London. There's a whole series of organisations who are very focused on bringing SMEs together. So I think we take the point, but it's absolutely fundamental to what we're trying to do, which is to promote collaborations which can lead to mutual benefit, rather than not only exports in either direction. Do we have, I think we have time for one more question before we break for coffee, if anybody else would like to ask the present panel anything? One question here.
This is Vedat Uslu from Ankara, ICT Market, CEO of ICT Terra Information and Communication Technologies Company. I would like to ask one question related with ICT again as my industry, because I found that in the list we have automotive, which is clear that Turkey has a certain place, global player, maybe not with his own brand, but as a supporter of the industry globally. And construction, very clear sector for Turkey, and I think everybody can admit that we have certain competencies over there, global competencies. But when we come to ICT, ICT is the brand new children, I think in this room, and I really wonder what is the view of ICT Turkey, ICT sector in Turkey from British point of view. Do we have a chance to cooperate with British partners from your point of view to become a global player together with British counterparts? Or are we discussing only the things we can do in Turkey? Because I think we have some chances. Whether it's visible to you, I really wonder this. Thank you.
Would you like to reply to some of that?
Well, I think the answer. I think the answer to that is yes, we do. I mean, we're not restricting ourselves to doing business in Turkey. As I think I said just now, it's very much a core part of UKTI's remit to look for opportunities elsewhere as well. So, I mean, we're not, although obviously our parochial focus is on Turkey, but we very much see it as a gateway to wider markets. I mean, it could be sort of Turkey's traditional your area of influence in the Middle East or Central Asia, but it doesn't only need to be. It could be you partnering with British companies and then accessing the European markets. Absolutely, we're open to all of that. So I hope that gives you some encouragement. Thank you. Unless there are any other questions, I think we'll break for coffee now. And if you could all be seated again by 10:15 for the second part of our session. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you. Take care.
For the next session. Thank you very much. Good morning. Günaydın, hoş geldiniz. Welcome. It's a great pleasure for me to be addressing you here today. My name is Saeed Shah, and I, along with my colleague Rafe Courage, who was here a few minutes ago, one of the Deputy Consul Generals at the British Consulate General in Istanbul. I'm also the head of trade investment. And on the trade investment side, not only do we cover Turkey, but we also hub from Istanbul, covering Central Asia and the South Caucasus. And this links into something that was mentioned in the previous session about partnerships between the UK and Turkey in third markets. And if I may just take a minute before we begin the next session, just to talk about some of those opportunities that we're looking at. Rafe mentioned that Turkish companies have some great contacts historically, traditionally, commercially in the wider region, Central Asia and the South Caucasus. And what we're seeing is significant growth opportunities. We're partnering between British companies, particularly in construction at the moment, where Turkish companies are some of the top companies in the world, building on a large scale in that region. And we're able to support them with design, engineering, architectural, program and project management expertise to deliver those contracts in those third markets. At the moment, the model that it works well on is construction, but there's no reason why we can't extend and expand that model to other sectors, including ICT and others that are represented here today. So that's enough for me for now. I'd like to introduce Mr. Ahmet Ekikci, who is a senior advisor at the Investment Support and Promotion Agency for Turkey, ISPAT. He's here to talk about the investment opportunities that Turkey presents and how, as British companies and British businesses, we can make the most of those continuing forward. Mr. Ahmet, thank you.
Thank you very much, Saeed. Dear guests, colleagues, friends, welcome to this Grow with Turkey SME Partnership event. I would like to also thank to DEIC as well as UKTI for organizing this event. My presentation is going to be about the general investment climate in Turkey. I'm aware that my time allocation is around 15 minutes, so I'll have to skip through some of the slides because I have close to 60 slides, so I'll have to start immediately. So the agenda is basically, I'll talk about some of the key figures in Turkey, talk about foreign direct investment, talk about some of the reasons why you should come and invest in Turkey, do business in Turkey. Eventually, talk about the agency, what we're trying to achieve in London and in other countries. As you might all know, Turkey is a G20 country, around 17th largest world economy in the world, and the 6th largest in Europe. This is according to 2012 figures. We have a population of around 76 million and growing. We've grown around sort of a million in 2012, and we expect it to sort of plateau around 93.5 million in 2050. We are the largest, we are the youngest population in Europe. The average age is around 30 years old. And because of the youngness of the population, the take-up of new technologies has been great, in the sense that, if you look at the credit card usage, GSM usage, the number of broadband subscribers, the numbers speak for themselves. But we also have a very diversified industrial base in Turkey. For example, Turkey is the 8th largest steel producer in the world, 16th largest automotive producer in the world. My colleague Ahmet Erdem is going to talk about it in one of the panel sessions after this. I think we are the 6th largest automotive producer in Europe. Turkey is actually the largest TV manufacturer. Two brand names maybe you might know, Beko and Vestel, are the largest TV producers in Europe. This is maybe a less known fact about Turkey. And we talked about construction. We are probably the second or the third largest, we have the second or the third largest construction sector globally. This is after the Chinese and the US. So we have a very vibrant construction sector that doesn't only do business in Turkey, but also in countries like Russia, Middle East, North Africa, very active, and we have a long history of very successful construction companies. Turkish Airlines is 50% owned by the state, 50% publicly owned company, and has been a major success story in its own right. I mean, from 2002 up until today, it has grown exponentially. I think Turkish Airlines is now the global airline carrier that flies to the largest number of destinations in the world, as well as the largest number of cities in the world. Turkey, as you know, is one of the most visited tourist destinations. We've overpassed UK and Germany recently to become the 6th most visited holiday destination in the world, as Lord Marland this morning referred. Some of the cities like Bodrum, Izmir, Antalya are visited by British tourists every year. If you look at the foreign direct investment, we've seen an increase in foreign direct investment flows significantly during the last 10-11 years. As you can see, some of the numbers compared to the previous 80 years, they're almost 8 times higher. If you look at the number of foreign capital companies in Turkey, we are now close to 34,000. And there is increasing confidence in the Turkish economy. If you look at this particular index, for example, we've moved recently from 23rd to 13th. If you look at some of the reasons why one should invest in Turkey, today the nominal GDP is around $800 billion. So it is a fairly large domestic market, and the growth rates are obviously much higher than European Union averages, around 5% over the last 10 years. But also going forward, according to OECD estimates, we are expected to average again 5.1 or 5.2% growth rates. And where is this growth coming from? The growth is coming from mostly from the domestic market, the private consumption, but as well as exports and private investment, as you can see in this graph. We talked about the entrepreneurial spirit of Turkey, the dynamism, the resilience, which rating agencies like Fitch refers to usually in their comments about Turkey, and this graph shows exactly that. I mean, if you look at how Turkey reacted right after the crisis in 2008-2009, according to some of its peers, obviously we've done much better than in terms of recovery some of the peer countries. We talked about this. The expected growth rate going forward over the next 5 years, according to OECD figures, is 5.1%. And we've also talked about the 2023. It is important for Turkey in the sense that it is a centennial for the Turkish Republic, and the current government has set very ambitious targets for 2003 across the board, across the economy. I guess some of the key pillars of those figures would be the target for GDP, which is $2 trillion, moving up from 800 billion today, and GDP per capita to reach $25,000. I think more than the numbers, the fact that there is a target set for the next 10 years is very important. It is definitely not, there wasn't a precedent in the previous years for Turkey to be able to set targets for the next 10 years, 25 years. So I think it is more than the numbers. I think the targets in general itself is very, very important. And we've seen obviously the tripling of the GDP over the last 10 years, but this also happened equally among the population. As you can see, back in 2002, percentage of poor people, this is I think a UN definition, living under $4.3 per day was around 30%, which basically came down to 2.8% only in 2011, which shows you the distribution of wealth when Turkey was growing over the last 10 years. There is a similar story here. I'm going to pass this one. And what happened during this period of high growth, we've obviously created a very, very strong new middle income economy, middle income class. And you can see some of the numbers. I mean, number of shopping malls. You know, now we have close to 350 shopping malls. You can see the motor vehicle sales and so on. But I think one point to point out here is that still these numbers compared to EU averages are very, very low in terms of penetration rate. So there is still more potential for Turkey to grow in these particular areas. This is a similar story. Again, you know, households with income levels between $10,000 and $50,000 have basically tripled over the last 8-10 years. The wealth, similar story. I'm going to skip this very quickly. And while Turkey was doing this, Turkey wasn't actually over-leveraging itself like some of the European Union countries or the developed markets like the US or Japan. I mean, still the household leverage in Turkey compared to GDP is around 21%. This is very, very favorable compared to some of the developed markets, as you can see. And I guess one of the major success stories of Turkey was its government's balance sheet. I mean, as you can see here, the debt to GDP ratios came down from close to 80% back in 2002 to now around 35%, expected to move down to 30% in the next 3 to 4 years. The similar story in budget deficit. We've reached definitely less than 2% budget deficit ratios when this government was in power. This year we are expecting around 1.5%, so similar story over the next 2 to 3 years. So the clean balance sheet of the government is very important, as we talked about. On the inflation front, again, this is the government which brought down the inflation to single-digit figures. Turkey has unfortunately suffered from very high inflation levels back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, 60%, 80% average inflation ratios. And under this government now, the inflation is around 7%, 7.5%. And the targets for inflation in the short term to near term is to bring it down to 5%. We have a similar story and a growth story in exports. Last year, we've surpassed $150 billion, which is a record export year. And not only the amount of export, but also the diversification of exports is also very interesting. Again, not only in geographies, but also the product mix of exports have been diversifying, as you can see some of these numbers at this table. And we can see the technology intensive part of the exports has been increasing. We are investing heavily in this particular area because we think that Turkey needs to still further increase the high-tech know-how component of the exports. So there's a great deal of drives from the government as policy for R&D and sort of technology investments and so forth. We have a number of free trade agreements with various different countries, but I think very importantly Turkey has a customs union agreement with the European Union since 1996, which means you can trade most of the goods, majority of the goods, I think up to 90%, free of any customs between the European Union and Turkey. Turkey's position, I think a lot of people talked about this. This chart explains it, I think, very well. As you can see, we are obviously very close to Europe, very close to Russia, Central Asia, as well as Middle East and North Africa. And within sort of 4 hours flight, you can reach to these destinations from Istanbul, which makes Istanbul as a very, geostrategically important location. And this is part of the reason why we are seeing a lot of the multinational companies setting up their regional headquarters in Istanbul. I think there are some quite amazing numbers here, like Coca-Cola, for example, managing its regional operations up to 94 countries from their Istanbul office. GE Healthcare, for example, moved their regional headquarters from London to Istanbul and managing around 80 countries from their Istanbul office. And similar stories in the list, for example, GlaxoSmithKline, obviously UK pharma giant, has recently moved their regional headquarters from Dubai to Istanbul and managing around 30 countries out of their Istanbul office. As I mentioned, I think the accessibility of Istanbul is important, the geostrategic location of Istanbul is important, but I'll also touch upon in the later slides, also the availability of labor pool, especially on the professional labor pool, is very, very important. We've listened to Serpil Hanım from Vodafone yesterday, for example. She's been recently promoted to become the regional CEO in Vodafone, managing 60% of global Vodafone's businesses. I think is a very good example on that front. If you look at, again, this is a story about Turkey's location. Turkey is a big consumer of oil and gas. We consume almost 95% of oil and gas, so we don't produce oil and gas. However, we are very close to the oil and gas producing countries, obviously Russia, Iraq, Iran, and other Middle Eastern countries. Around 70% of the world's reserves are actually located in the east part of Turkey, and the closer number of world's consumption of those hydrocarbons is actually within Europe. So we are actually literally an energy corridor between the east and the west when it comes to energy. And again, Lord Marland referred to a company called Genel Enerji. We like to think it's a Turkish company rather than an English company, but they are very big in Iraq, and they are obviously a very important player in oil and gas in northern Iraq. We talked about the population compared to Europe, very, very favorable. And because of the youngness of the population, we still have a demographic dividend that we'll hopefully be able to benefit from up until 2040. So still there is a window of around sort of 25-30 years where Turkey is going to be able to benefit from the demographic dividends, which is going to boost the growth rates that we are expecting to have. This again compares to Europe very, very favorably. Education, I mean, Turks value education very much. As we said, we are a very young population, but we value education. We have close to 21 million students in Turkey. We talked about the availability of very strong and skilled labor force in Turkey. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to probably skip this as well. We have very good work ethics. As I said, we value work, we value education heavily. One of these indices show that. And this economy has been creating almost 1 million jobs every year during the last 4 years. So this is when the EU was in crisis and right after the Lehman crisis. So I think this is a very, very important statistic for Turkish economy to be able to generate close to 1 million jobs every year. And on the manufacturing front, which could be relevant to some of the participants here, the government policy is to make Turkey as a manufacturing hub between Germany and Japan and China. And Turkey is definitely moving up the ladder on that front. We talked about some of the sectors where Turkey is a global player rather than a regional player. And this obviously has happened through a very, very aggressive reform agenda that we've seen over the last 10 years, and we are expecting that to continue in the foreseeable future. I'm not going to go into details of these reforms. However, we've passed, for example, the Foreign Direct Investment Law back in 2003, which made a foreign company exactly same as a local company, which means that you can come and set up in Turkey 100% and be treated exactly as a local company. So there's no difference in treatment as you might find in some other emerging markets. And obviously both the capital account and the trade account of Turkey is fully liberalized, which means you can bring money in and take money out, no questions asked. Back in July 2012, we've upgraded our commercial code, which was at the time around 50 years old, and based on mostly the continental Europe's commercial code. I think this commercial code is bringing a lot of transparency and accountability, and we're going to hopefully see the benefits of this new code going forward in the next years. I think one of the main important points of this code is now it's going to enforce Turkish companies to bring their accounting standards to international financial reporting standards, IFRS standards. I think this is very, very important in terms of financing, in terms of doing partnerships with foreign companies and so forth. We talked about doing business in Turkey. It is easy, but we are nowhere close to where we want to be. I mean, but there is definitely improvement as we speak. So the government is definitely in introducing policies that will support doing business easily in Turkey. As I said, this is work in progress, so we're nowhere close to where we want to be. In terms of competitiveness, similar story, we are moving up the ladder. This is, I think, the World Economic Forum index. This is interesting because I think more for larger scale investments. Turkey has been upgraded by Fitch and Moody's over the last year to investment grade. So Turkey today is an investment grade country. This is after 20 years. We were investment grade country back in 1993, I think the last time before that. Again, in June 2012, the Turkish government has announced and started implementing a very, very comprehensive investment incentive scheme. This is a very, very detailed and comprehensive program, so I'm not going to be able to go into detail, but mainly we are providing a lot of different incentives on the tax front, on the allocation, on the social security premiums, according to different times in different zones in the country. So we divided Turkey into 6 different zones. As Hasan Bey this morning has mentioned, for example, if you come and invest in the 6th zone, which is usually on the east part of the country, you will get the highest benefits. I think the Minister of Finance figure is that if you invest 100 Turkish lira, the total amount of the benefits is going to be around 116 Turkish lira. So almost more than double the amount that you are investing. Very little on the agency. We are part of Turkish Prime Minister's office. We directly report to him. We have a private sector approach. We have 2 offices in Ankara and Istanbul, and we have advisors like myself across the globe, close to 20 countries, like United States, India, China, Japan. And we basically, literally, we can handhold foreign investors from A to Z. I mean, it could be anything from market analysis to finding local partners, to helping them with the permit applications and so forth. There is a list of things that we provide in our website and explained in more detail. I talked about the global coverage of the agency. So we do cover most of the FDI exporting countries globally through people like myself, and 2 offices in Istanbul and Turkey. Actually, I have my colleagues from Istanbul today, so I would advise you to go and find them if you have any specific questions throughout the day. So I think this is going to conclude my presentation. But so if you need any help with your investments and doing business in Turkey, please come and find us. We'll be more than happy to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. I'd now like to introduce Nick Baird, who's the Chief Executive Officer of UK Trade and Investment. We've heard about the opportunities of investing in Turkey, and Nick is going to tell us about why the UK should be the source for our investment. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to be here. As a former British ambassador in Turkey, this relationship matters a great deal to me. And I do think there's huge complementarity. Ahmed's slides demonstrated, as I hope I will show in my remarks, how as Turkey develops as an economy and a society, the sorts of things that Britain produce are very relevant to that development. But also, what Turkey produces is very relevant for us as well. I was actually in Istanbul myself a couple of weeks ago with a group of friends. We ran in the not in the Istanbul Marathon, but the 15-kilometre race that was going alongside it. And as well as being friends, these were all people who run their own businesses or are part of the private sector. Of course, they all loved Istanbul's historic sites, but what surprised them most was the huge opportunity, the huge business opportunity, the sophistication of the economy that they saw in front of them. And that's, in a sense, part of my point. I think, although we have a good economic relationship, it could be so much better. Not enough British companies know about the opportunities that are in Turkey, and I would say the same is true of Turkish companies in this country. Let me say a few words first about the economic context, the UK's economic drive around trade and investment and where Turkey fits into that. And then I'll focus in on a particularly important aspect of it, which is getting more Turkish companies to invest in the UK. So trade and investment is absolutely at the core of the government's strategy to get Britain back into sustainable growth after the global crisis of 2008 and 2009. One of the important lessons we learned as a country out of that crisis was that the growth model that we'd had before was based far too much on domestic consumption fueled by debt. And we've run as a country a trade deficit now for some 40 years, and it's not healthy. We need to get ourselves back into balance. We need to be exporting a great deal more, and we need to be encouraging foreign investment into this country much more. And for us, looking at where the opportunities lie globally, we're of course acutely conscious that our biggest export market, the European Union on our doorstep, is weak and has challenges going forward. So we need to get much better at exporting into the big growth markets of the world. The BRICS, of course, but also the CIVICs, including Turkey, the big emerging and developing markets of Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. In those markets, the UK sits behind its European Union, its biggest European Union competitors. We're behind Germany, France and Italy in those markets, and indeed we are as exporters into Turkey. But I strongly believe that over the next period, what we as a country produce will be more and increasingly relevant to those countries as their economies develop and mature. So there are huge infrastructure needs in those countries, as of course there are in Turkey, huge infrastructure projects, and the UK has fantastic architects, design engineers, project managers, construction equipment providers who can help with those projects. The countries, as Ahmed's slides designed, need more education provision, need more health provision. The UK is incredibly strong in this area. They have growing, again as Ahmed's slides designed, growing middle classes who have consumption needs which British fashion, British retail, British media are well placed to satisfy. So I think that this is a very strong, has really strong potential going forward. But also an incredibly important part of this is attracting more foreign investment into the UK. Now, the UK is, from within the European Union, it is the #1 destination for foreign direct investment. And we are actually increasing that gap against our European Union partners, including Germany and France. Last year, overall investment flows were actually down by over 20% globally, but the UK bucked that trend, and we actually increased FDI last year by 18%. And I want to say a few words about why I believe that is the case, and why I believe it is relevant to Turkish companies going forward. And Turkish companies of all sizes, not just very large Turkish companies. Of course, we know Beko and Vestel, Vitra, others are present and active in this market, but there are huge opportunities right across the board. And I would put the key characteristics of the UK economy and why there are real opportunities for Turkish companies under kind of 3 headings: openness, opportunity, and innovation. So, first of all, opportunity. The UK is the 6th largest economy in the world. We have certainly had a tough economic crisis, but we are now emerging from that on a very sustainable, broad-based basis. So we have very strong figures now in our manufacturing sector, strong figures on construction in the UK, and our services sector after the really tough period the financial services sector has had is growing again very strongly. And I think we're also helped by the fact that we are in the European Union, but we are not in the euro. So some of the difficulties that the euro countries are facing at the moment in terms of adjusting their currency to help growth going forward are of course affect the UK as the European Union is a big export market for us, but they do not bind us in the same way as other European Union countries. So the opportunity is huge, and I would say the opportunity is very broad-based. Most people looking at the UK know and see the UK as a service-based economy. They know we have a very strong financial services industry. They know we have a very strong professional and business services industry, the law, accountancy, and so on. But less people recognise that the UK is also a very strong manufacturing economy. It is, of course, at the advanced end. We cannot compete in low-cost mass manufacturing, but we can and do very strongly compete in terms of high innovation, high research, advanced manufacturing. So if you take our automotive sector, for example, in the 1970s, Britain's automotive sector was a disaster. We are now, as a country, exporting more cars than we ever did. And there are some important characteristics to this. One is that this is driven very heavily by foreign investment. So the owners of the largest car production companies in the UK are all foreign. They are Japanese, they are Indian, they are German. And of course it's largely at the luxury end. The Indians, Tata, who own Jaguar Land Rover, are now exporting all over the world. It's a fantastically successful brand. But this is also an area where we have grown back a supply chain. So smaller companies producing into the larger companies are operating from the UK. And there is a real opportunity for smaller Turkish companies who are in their own supply chain within Turkey into the automotive industry to set up and manufacture here and to reduce their costs by taking out the transport element of them. And there's a lot of government support for that. We have a programme called the Advanced Manufacturing Supply Chain Initiative, which puts grants and loans into supply chain companies supplying into the automotive sector. And it's not just automotive, so aerospace. When people hear Airbus, they think principally of the French, but actually 55% of the value of an Airbus plane is made in the United Kingdom, in Bristol in the West and in Wales. Again, we are looking to grow back the supply chain there. The rail industry. There are huge rail opportunities in the United Kingdom. Hitachi has recently set up a vast rolling stock manufacturing plant in the northeast of England, and Bombardier Canada already do so. Again, huge opportunities in that sector. Secondly, our infrastructure. People talk a lot, and of course Turkey is one of them, of the huge infrastructure needs and developments in the emerging markets of the world. But developed markets, certainly the UK, have very large infrastructure needs as well, both to replace ageing infrastructure, but because of the way the world is changing. So we have a massive energy infrastructure programme in offshore wind and in nuclear in particular. These provide vast opportunities, and nuclear, I would say in particular, given that Turkey itself is developing a huge nuclear programme, a great deal of opportunity for partnership there. And the UK is immensely open again in this area. So as a number of you will have read recently, China has taken a large stake in the first new nuclear project in the UK for many decades. Now, there are not many other European Union countries which would allow China to take that sort of stake, but we are extremely open. We welcome that. It brings jobs to Britain, it brings investment to Britain.